Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Eric Ruland. I'm a product manager and consultant here at CA Experts, and as such responsible for AppControls, UPV web services, browser-based viewing, and associated technologies. Today marks the beginning of a series regarding AppControls, one of the big new features of UPV NT that will be released soon. In today's first part of the series, we will look at the first introduction of AppControls. As always, the session will be recorded and we will provide you a link to the recording by email afterwards. At any time during the webinar, feel free to use the chat panel and state your questions, and I will try to answer as many as possible after the session. If not during this webinar, I will answer them via email. Now, let's have a look at today's agenda. We will look at the current challenges and risks in interoperability and integration. Afterwards, we will look at the current approach of UPV and its limitation, and then follow up with the new AppControls and how it tries to solve these limitations. I will also show an example of AppControls as well as I will also show you an example of an app control as well as the code used to create this app control. So let's get started with the challenges. We have an ever-increasing number of applications at our disposal. This means employees need to be trained on every single one of these applications and often also need to be retrained in case of updates. It is also hard to integrate multiple applications with each other, as many applications simply lack the flexibility to integrate, but some also are behind a high cost point. If they are able to integrate, we often have a duplication of data. So there's no longer a single point of truth, and it requires a higher administration effort to get this done. And often, if there's no automatic synchronization available, we need to start doing a manual data transfer between the applications. And this can lead to inconsistent data if the applications were not synchronized correctly, data's missing, or maybe it just simply might be out of date. Now we're going to the current approach of UPV. UPV always had multiple ways to integrate with other applications. The first one is deep linking. Deep linking is easy to integrate. It is different between the standalone UPV and browser-based viewing in some cases. So we have two systems for UPV API calls. It works with both. But if you started with only browser-based viewing and you might have been using direct web calls, you will need to have a small rework or a small modification of the links to get a stable version that works on both. So standalone UPV and browser-based viewing. Another point is you are not able to get any responses from UPV. So you have no idea if the deep linking command worked, or you're also not able to get any attributes from the model. Further on, we have the API. The API is way more extensive than the deep linking. So we now have the options to get attributes back from UPV, but this comes at a point where we have different approaches between a standalone UPV and a browser-based viewing UPV. It also requires external programming and a separate application to be running in the background. With the different approach between UPV and browser-based viewing, this also comes at the point that there's a complete rework of the application, of the integration necessary when you want to switch from local to browser-based viewing. And for a lot of people that are working on site and maybe only have a tablet available, there's also the point we have, or at least with this old API, we have no possibility to use it under iOS and Android. But this is about to change with the new AppControls. With AppControls, you can integrate your existing back office systems and databases into UPV. These can all communicate to UPV in a unified way. That means we no longer have different APIs between the standalone viewer and browser-based viewing, but we also have a unified way of communicating between Windows, Android, and iOS. So you can use an app control or your integration on all platforms, so also on site, for example, where you might not have a laptop or computer available. You can now customize UPV to meet your needs. So you're no longer forced to use our functions that we designed or have said these are useful for our customers. Maybe you only need a few of them, so you can disable some and instead show some different functions that we will see later. It also comes with security by default. So only whitelisted app controls can be used, and the API usage for app controls can be restricted, and that is all done on a per model basis, just to give you the maximum security or the maximum security for your models. Then there's also the question of where is this integration or this app control stored? We have multiple ways to do it to give you the most flexibility. So we can reference an app control inside the model. So you can have the final app control can be then on a web server, it can be a local application, or it can also be on a remote share. There's also the possibility to run it fully inside the model tree. In this case, this needs to be an offline app control. This has some more restrictions, and we will get to talk about this one more in a future part of the series. Also, please note, some of these options might be limited or not available on platforms like Android and iOS. So we always recommend to use either the web server approach or the offline app control approach, as these are the most stable versions that work on all systems. And now it's time for a live demo. So as you can see here, we have UPV NT, our newest version that will be released soon. And I can now create a new app control. So I can just go here on the add button, select app control, and now I get a small pop-up. The select option, that is for offline app controls. We won't go into detail about these ones in today's session. This is then topic for another one. What we are now interested in is this edit URL part. So in here we can paste, for example, this one goes to http://localhost and on port 5000. And this is an application running on my local machine. This could also be running on a web server again. It's just for demonstration purposes, it's running on my local machine. I can now save it. I can rename it. I can rename it and just call it custom controls. And I can open this up again. I renamed, had it spelled wrong, but it's just an example. So right here, this app control is actually inside UPV. It has its own tab context. And inside our multi-window system, I can now also drag it and, for example, place it at the bottom of the screen and resize it so it fits my need. And I still have, for example, my attributes available at the top. This app control is an app control to create basically quick actions. So as an example, I'm not interested in all this steel work. I'm only interested in piping, equipment, and so on. So of course I could use the tree, for example, to disable things, or I could use attributes and search for the attributes and select everything by that attribute and then click on hide. But with app controls, you can create a shortcut. So if you say every single day you start up the model, you say, I don't really need this to see the steel. You can just click on the hide steel button and all the steel is gone. Then maybe you have a color file that you normally would load or would apply some colors to the model. that are based, for example, on the system that they are connected to. Of course, then you can go to file management and of course load the display style, select the Excel file, but maybe the Excel file needs to be generated each day newly. So it's way easier to just have a button in here, set color, and now you can see in a few seconds all the pipes in the model are colored depending on the system they are connected to. And this goes really quickly and really easily. I also have a second app control to show you. So again, I close this app control, create a new one. And in this time, let me just copy the link for it. As you can see, this is a local index HTML file that is just somewhere on my C drive. I can again save it. It's still a development version, so sometimes interactions is a bit not the best, but this is still getting improved till the final release. So let me just call it valve states, and also let me just should have done this before. Let me just quickly reset all the colors. Actually, for this one, I can use this one and just click on reset instead of going in the manual way, and everything is back to default. So now I have my valve states. I can open this up again, and I can see all my valves are now colored. And this is depending on the state. I can make it a bit bigger so I can see it fully. So green is an open valve, red is a closed valve. In this case, information is just stored on the database. But as it's just an example, this could also be your management system. So maybe you have valves that can be remotely operated. So you could have a system in place where the valves can be controlled from the 3D model or maybe also from IntelliPit. And you can just open and close valves from here. If it's not possible, maybe you have a system that can read the valve state from on-site and just display it in here, so everyone has the same image of what's the current state of the model. Or an alternate option would be you want to create log lists. So you have a procedure. So for example, we want to switch this valve down here. What valves do we need to close and open up to get this done? So now I can say, for example, I need to open up this bypass valve. I need to close these two valves and open up these drain valves. And now I would be able to remove this valve down here. And this could be all recorded and either then directly performed via automatic valves, or for example, printed onto a log list and handed to an engineer on site that then performs these actions. In the future webinar part, or in the future part of this series, I will also show you an extension of this feature where we also load simulation data into the model. So you can see before you would actually toggle a valve, how does it affect the entire system? So how is the pressure? Is there a pressure buildup if I would close this valve? What is the flow rate? Is the pipe empty or not, and so on. All of these things could be simulated beforehand before you even send someone out to turn the valve. Good. So let me continue with that presentation and go a bit further. So for the first one, for the custom actions app control that I showed you earlier, this is the source code that's running this app control. As you can see, it's not really important that you understand exactly what each of these lines does. It's more important, it's in total less than 20 lines of code to get this functionality. So it is really easy to integrate. It's really easy. Basically, I would say someone with some experience should be able to create app controls. Basically, this these quick links, for example, in less than half a day and have them up and running, can use them already, and can save a lot of time for tasks that need to be repeated often.